Hello everyone, I'm Sha, the writing and research half of the Tales and Oracle of 11. Some of you may know me as Little Cat on this channel, but for those who are new, hello, 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 and I hope you're having a great week, month, year, and beyond. Fast talking and throwing truth morsels at us at crazy speeds. That's where our friend here sits when it comes to this interview. He is very insightful as an individual when it comes to his industry and his thoughts on his home country. There is a lot of meaning in his artwork that speaks about effective marketing, meaningful outreach, and maybe some history with a smidge of colonialism to taste. This is Angrooh, our artist from Singapore. So, thank you so much for being here with us. I super
Absolutely.
duper appreciate what you have done already. I love your piece of art.
Thank you.
It's very cute. I don't know if Sun
Thank you.
told you what I saw, and I was like, no.
Uh, I think she alluded to something, but I was like, you don't have to tell me anything. It's cool. Yes.
I it's my brain is dirty.
No,
Anyway,
I understand. Okay, I understand, but yeah,
right,
that's
right, right, right.
yeah,
It's a very strange object
yeah. It's
to
a
see.
the shape makes sense. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Um.
also like it was constructed specifically to take that form too. So it's just like, okay, that's very strange because it's a replication, not an actual thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And they
But
decided to depict it like an unbuilt. It's actually like it's not the full structure, but they
uh-huh.
decided to recreate it in that way. I'm just like, why as a broken thing, which is very strange. But
That
yeah,
was a decision by somebody.
yeah,
Somebody actually went,
it
I want that.
sure was, it sure was, and like you alluded to, the color is very evocative as well.
Uh-huh.
It's just like,
Uh-huh.
okay.
It's
Mm.
wild. It's wild.
I am Andrew Go. I use he, him pronouns, and I don't really maintain my online presence particularly well or really ever, but I do have like a Twitter account with my art and an Instagram account too with some of my like, all of it. Like, but I think that's worth like you can find me at on Twitter or on Instagram. My handle for both is ANGROOGOH Angrooh.
Angrooh.
Or my web. I do have a personal website too for my portfolio called animate now sleep later.com. Yes.
Animate now, sleeplater.com. You heard
Yeah,
it first.
very toxic habit. Don't do
I was just
it.
about to say, like all the names, like where did you decide to use Angrooh instead of Andrew? And why
It's just
sleep
a
later?
animate now sleep later is just like a little play on like, oh my gosh, people animators just like, especially in college, they overwork themselves, and it's just like it's a terrible thing to do. But I thought I
Mm-hmm,
was just
mm-hmm.
poking for a little fun of it.
Okay.
Angrooh is just a nickname that a friend gave me, like because I do like do things like I go on rants all the time and like have a very like aggressive attitude. So like, angry, angry. So,
Oh,
okay,
because
I guess
angry.
yeah. So I'm just
Oh,
I thought it was cute, so I decided to adopt that with
see,
that
I
permission.
wouldn't have guessed that it was like an angry Andrew. I thought it was like a very cute, like Angroo.
Yeah, I think that's part of the conversation, right? Oh, you're so angry.
Angry.
You
Angry.
know,
Oh.
yeah, it's just like, well, thanks for de-escalating my my aggression, I
That's
guess.
that's one way to do it. How'd you find yourself
Yeah.
in the arts?
I mean, I think as is common for a lot of artists, I'm sure not it doesn't apply to everybody, but it's just common for a lot of artists. They start young,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it's like, oh, I like drawing a lot as a young. So like, not, but not. I had cultivated that, not actively, just like, oh, I would draw a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
then until I didn't really consider that as like a potential career until like tertiary education, like whatever people's equivalent of high school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, oh, the people who work in cartoons and stuff, they get paid, and it's just like, oh, that's a thing I could do because I actually care about this thing more than any of the other subjects everybody learns. It's just like, okay, that sounds like a cool thing. So
Uh-huh.
I went there. I went to like in Singapore, where I'm from. There's a local school that does animation for like a tertiary education. So I went there, and then I went to the US to a college called Savannah College of Art Design
Mm-hmm.
to specialize in animation. And after that, right after that, I got employed out of graduation into a company called Telltale Games as a cinematic artist, working on narrative video games. and then after that company went under, and I eventually got employment at a small educational video company called Immerse Games right now, where I reside in Buffalo, New York. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So explain to me, because I'm like a pleb when it comes to very specific niche, uh, art related jobs. What is a cinematic designer? What is that?
Also, our cinematic artist. I mean, I guess those terms are always interchangeable. So like, this
Uh-huh.
was so a cinematic artist is a person like in video games. There's like the video game portion. Like, if there's a story video game where like, oh, they play the games and there's like whatever it is shooting or slashing or puzzle solving or whatever the form the game takes. But if there's a story component, sometimes there's cutscenes, right? Where it's like, oh, this is the part where the story's happening, and there's like kind of like a little movie that plays.
Mm-hmm.
There's like the characters like, oh, finding more motivations or meeting characters or stuff like that. That's essentially what the cinematic artists, at least where I work at specifically, that's what we do. We kind of create the scenes. Specifically, as my duties or our duties as cinematic artists is to do what's called layout, which is like we set the characters in place, we apply the animation so that they move, and we animate the camera so that there's like a cinematic, so
Yeah.
all the camera cuts, all the camera motions and transitions. That's our primary task.
Task. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. There's so many parts of
Oh
a
yeah.
video game that we don't really think about as players.
Yes.
And having you here to sort of talk about that perspective is really interesting for me, because people talk about making games as if it's so easy. Especially we have things like
Yeah.
was it the RPG makers and things like
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Um, everybody deigns to make a video game, but they don't really think about the storyline. They don't really think about how artistic they want to get, the
Yes.
direction they want to
Right.
go, and what the
Yeah.
point of the story is, I think. But again,
Yeah.
this is me
Video
coming
games.
from like the layperson.
No, no worries. That's completely understandable, and it's like it's sort of both places where like sometimes gamers don't really seek out the information, and you get that kind of like that kind of community. But it's
Hmm.
also something in the animation. I mean, the video game industry itself that tends to be a very secretive industry. Like leaks
Mm.
and stuff gets
Hmm.
controlled a lot. Something for like mostly business reasons because like that affects a lot of things like licensing and stuff. But like yeah, a video game is like it is a complicated like piece of software, like a monumentally complicated piece of
Mm.
software. Like it is consists of many moving parts. Like even like the worst game you can think of, like like the most unpolished, like kind of like maybe not well thought out game of a lot of work goes into even those.
Hmm.
And they're like huge organizational, like logistical and financial nightmares. So it's
Hmm.
like yeah, so yeah, it's understandable. There's like, oh, so yeah, these are a lot of parts that like are very difficult, and but they come together, and it's a miracle that a single game gets made anywhere, and so like it's incredible that we have this huge like domineering industry in the entertainment space.
I feel like it's
You
gonna
know,
get better as well, because we're running. I honestly think that cinema in general is becoming um, culturally bankrupt, not just
mm,
culturally but creatively as well. Especially
yeah,
the big production houses just churning
yeah,
really terrible stuff. And I think what's taking its place is animation. Although animation is definitely a part of cinema, people
exactly,
don't
yeah,
see it that way. And I think
yeah.
it's good that it's coming up. There's a lot of really interesting stuff coming up on YouTube, especially like
Oh, sure, yes.
all the production houses that aren't so big. It's
Yeah,
like one or two people.
yeah.
For example, I can't think of the name right now. Hell of a Boss, for example.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That YouTube series, yes, with
Mm,
like a really like polished, fantastic, almost like basically studio grade
yeah.
animation, incredible voice work. Very funny from what I understand. I've only caught a bit of it, but yeah, what an incredible feat. Also,
Hmm.
film is sort of the same way. Film and television and stuff are sort of the same way. They are huge projects, also
Hmm.
huge logistical, organizational nightmares. Again, miracles that any of them get made, and it's amazing that they're there. But also, it's the reason why a lot of them like may not like get the cut. Might not be as
Yeah.
good. It's just because those are difficult things to
I
do.
mean, it's
So
usually trying to get the shareholders to agree that this would be a money making
Mm.
endeavor
Yeah.
instead of going at it like, look, it's a piece of art. We want to give it to
Yeah.
as many people as possible, which is how I view this
Yes.
project. It's a piece of
Yeah.
art.
I mean,
I want to give it to as many people as possible.
yeah, that's a very good. I think that instinct that you have is like spot on, basically, because
Mm,
like again, alluding to the thing I said about being logistical nightmares. That's why a lot of bigger studios will play it safe because like financially they want to
mm,
like they're like we have to be safe because because if we screw this up, it's a big loss for us and stuff like that. So it's just it's just a natural it's consequence of like capitalism
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
like that particular economic structure that our most of our world lives under, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's not great.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's definitely not great. With the stories that you know, with the background that you have, with the artistic direction that you're very used to, how much do you know about Singapore's folk tales and oral history?
I gotta say, and then this is like again, I'm getting back to a little bit political stuff on this, and
Uh-huh,
if you're
uh-huh.
okay with it,
Yeah,
but
go
yeah,
ahead.
I would say that I wouldn't know too much about like say a lot of my country's folklore and stuff, especially in Singapore. Like, I mean, you're from the neighboring country,
Malaysia.
right? I
Yeah.
believe, yeah, yeah. So you know that Singapore like has like a kind of like very sanitized like culture to it. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't Singapore itself like obviously doesn't have a very long recorded history. It obviously has a long history. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like current colonial recording, like not very long. Our education system prioritizes like social and political aspects of our history rather than like cultural or artistic aspects.
Mm-hmm.
So not very surprising that I wouldn't like very most people don't get exposed to a lot of like folklore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it's kind of like pushed down for like economic like uh, focus in
Yeah, yeah.
education.
So
So
very
yeah.
very post-industrial revolution kind of jobs.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's also like I don't want to like box or generalize into a
Yep.
thing, but it's a very like Asian like something that I think most Asians like understand like very like collectivist culture, collective economic culture of like you gotta work in stuff that is like more about making money rather
Mm-hmm.
than like self expression and stuff like that. So it's like I did so big as a result that people like don't really get exposed to a lot of like older folklore and culture and stuff like that, and they get like a very sanitized version of their history.
Yeah. And to
Very like
me,
a
like speaking from the position of a Malaysian living in Kuala Lumpur, I feel
uh-huh.
like for the most part people don't view our oral history and our folklore and traditional stuff as important because um we're so focused on thinking of the future. Like for the longest
Yeah.
time Malaysia was zoned into the 2020 vision, right?
Oh,
But
okay,
that
gotcha.
didn't
Yes,
happen.
yes.
Like flying cars and houses in the sky, that kind of thing. We got houses in the sky, I guess. Uh, but but do you think it's more so in Singapore where a bulk of the economy comes from migration
as it migrate into Singapore.
into Singapore? Yeah, was it
Yeah.
emigrate? Like to emigrate in, yeah.
Okay, yes. I think that's definitely a part of it for sure. Yeah, I see that too. Like a lot of our money comes from. I do think that actually more than that, there's a lot of like specific local things that Singapore
Mm-hmm,
does. But yes, we definitely as a historically as a trade part for like a lot of Western countries,
mm-hmm,
that is definitely where the money comes in. Right, we're basically a pit stop for a lot of transport ships, and that
mm-hmm,
made us essentially it's one of the things that made us rich. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So yeah. And
And
so again, like understand like a lot of things is like being a lot of like upbringing in Singapore is like being important to understand the system of that economic system and like contributing to that rather than anything
mm-hmm,
else.
mm-hmm. How do you think that affected people's reception to just stories in general? Because I know growing up, we consumed the Great Singapore Ghost Stories. You know those books?
Oh yeah, I remember
Yeah,
those.
we
Like
had that
I
across the
didn't read those,
causeway.
but yeah.
Um, how
Wow.
it was wild. Everybody loves ghosts. Southeast Asians, we love ghosts. Because ghosts are terrifying and they're
Yes.
ubiquitous in our culture. But I
Yes.
found it interesting that a lot of the ghost stories were made popular in Singaporean writing.
Oh, interesting. I
Yeah.
I I didn't know any of this. But I mean, like, I'm not to like doubt that or anything. I'm just
Mhm.
like, oh, I guess I just personally have exposed myself to that aspect so much. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess we all contemplate that. But Singapore exports stories. It's kind of the thing, like a lot, again with a lot of Asian cultures, it's like stories like this,
Uh-huh.
artistic things, or like these kind of things, they kind of get relegated to like ideations of like, oh, this is something you do as a child. It's
Yeah.
a childish thing. It's like it's not a serious thing that you do,
No.
especially as a
Yeah.
career. So I feel like that kind of plays into like, oh, all these kind of like interests and hobbies and interests that sort of become, yeah, can become a big part of the identity.
Mhm.
Maybe you shouldn't do that so much as an adult, or rather like it's just a side thing you do. You have to concentrate on family, which is valid, and you
Mhm.
concentrate on making money. That's even more important. So
Yeah. It sounds
it
like
feels like
you got a lot of pushback for wanting to go in the arts. How did you push through
uh
that?
I would say my parents are actually pretty supportive. It's more about community, and I think that's more
Ah.
important, right? Like,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
like it's just a cultural thing of like, and I'm sure you've at least seen aspects of this, like where you're from too. But it's like,
Mhm.
oh, hey, the arts is like not a worthwhile endeavor to go into. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, be all that,
Mm.
or
Eternally the
whatever
starving
engineer.
artist. Like, if you go
Oh
into the
yeah,
arts or design, you will not get money. You will not be able to support
yeah,
yourself. Blah blah blah.
and and it's
Mhm.
true, and it's true not on the fault of the artist, obviously. Yeah,
I mean, we
it's
saw what
a again,
happened
it's
during
a
COVID. Newspapers coming out and going, "Oh yeah, the most important jobs 1 to 5," and then the five least important jobs at and one of the five was like graphic designers or just creatives in
yeah.
general. And I was like, how could you say that? Like,
It's just part of the culture. That's like, I mean, I yes, it's shock. It's like terrible, but not surprising, right? It's kind of like
I mean, you would
it's
think
like
at
a
this
very
day and
like
age, yeah.
because again, there's still the idea of like, oh, it's a hobby, and it's not something that because they always like separate form and function, even though
Mm,
like graphics and art is like a huge part of function too. Like
hmm
like being able to buy stuff. You bought something because it looks nice, it's packaged nicely. That's an
mm.
artist thing, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I remember going
all
into Marks and Spencer and literally buying a can of smoked mackerel because the can looks nice.
yeah, right. You see something and you're like, oh, that's so cute. The design, that's like good
Exactly.
enough to
Yeah,
like
yeah.
make the poster. It's like,
So
oh,
arts
you
and
want to
design.
invalidate it? Yeah.
The thing is, I just find it very very strange that even now we haven't sat down and gone, look, creatives are very very important in our community. Social
Of course.
sciences in general is very very important in our community,
Yeah.
more so sometimes than
Mhm.
general STEM. I feel I'm probably gonna get stoned for
Yeah.
this, but STEM is good.
Steam, right? Because like there's always that they don't want to
Yes, yes,
introduce the word Steam with
yeah,
A
yeah.
and then art.
Ah,
Like
it didn't take
ah,
off. It really did
yeah.
not take off.
It's unfortunate. Like the humanities in general like need to play a bigger part in
Mm,
like
mm, mm, mm.
social building and stuff like that. But
Because
it's
we
just not the
control
case.
so much of cultural evolution. What people
Yes,
consume will inform how they grow.
you're absolutely right. Yes, it's just yeah, it's an integral part of building a human.
Absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely. So because you were you a reader growing up, like
I
consuming
was
content?
yeah, I guess growing up, I would say I read not say a lot, just like a moderate amount.
hmm
Yeah,
Okay.
I read more graphic novels and stuff like that, and I will count that personally, but I don't know about
No,
you,
no,
but
it's still reading.
I def
I
yes, it's
fully
still
support
reading.
people who go, oh yeah, I never read. I only read comics, and I'm like, that's still reading. You use
That's
your eyes, you
yeah,
use your faculties to understand things.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. There's interpretation going on anyway.
exactly.
So
Because
yeah.
we're having that interpretation problem with people from the blind community as well. It's like, oh, if you listen to audiobook, is that considered reading? And I'm like, yes, yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah. What you're still understanding the words.
Exactly. You might not be
It's just through
using
a
your
different
eyeballs.
sense.
Exactly. You're
Yeah,
still reading it. So that
you're
pisses
still
me off
trying to
most of the time.
understand themes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or ideas. It's just yeah, of course.
You're using your brain juices, man.
right now these days, like and now I will say like I just love film, just the
Hmm.
medium of film. I just love it so much. It's like narrative theory and all that.
Okay, who's
My
your
absolute
current
favorite.
favorites right now in terms of film? Like I
In
am
terms
a
of
big
film,
fan of Denis Villeneuve. Like he
oh
does
yeah,
the
Dine.
show don't tell really well.
Yes, yeah, he's a very good. Basically what I feel like he's. I like some of his movies, and then there's some that are kind of like a little miss for me. But
Hmm.
what I can see he's trying to do, he's trying to do the Nolan thing where they're trying to emulate. I'm sure you know Stanley Kubrick.
Yes,
Like
yes. He
yes,
was a
his.
big determinant in what I watched as a child. Most of the
Oh
movies
sure,
that I
yes,
enjoyed was Kubrick films. I understand that
yeah.
most of them are problematic now, but
I
cinematically, they're
don't
still
think.
really beautiful.
Yeah, cinematic great movies, and I don't think they're problematic because like they're kind of they don't like endorse the
Mm.
terrible things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Although like he himself was kind of a terrible person in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, but the main thing is that like a lot of his style of like shooting is very cold, very
Mm-hmm.
clinical. Like he's kind of part of what makes his film successful is sort of a rejection of character,
Ah.
to like sort of focus on the broader. And that's why it makes things like A Clockwork Orange and other
Mm-hmm.
movies like that were it's like more about like observing. It's very tacit rejection of like making a character like fulfilled. It's part of adding to the uncanny valley and
I
making and
I
so
know
that it
you
makes
say
these
that,
statements.
but A Clockwork Orange is one of my more favorite. I would say it's one of my top tens, right?
Absolutely, yeah, that's
It
intense.
does have a lot of character in that. Yes, cinematically, it's shot in a very clinical way, but because
Yeah,
it's shot in such a clinical way, the characters pop out more. I feel
sure.
like Alex
Yeah, and
becomes way more violent in that
oh
very
yeah,
sterile spot.
intellectually is like I guess it's more about like it's not say a rejection of character. It's more like a
Yeah, yeah.
focus on like the on environmental effects of character, which
Mm-mm.
is exactly what it is. And Denis Villeneuve is kind of like trying to emulate that a lot.
Yeah,
It's
I
I
think
think it's
he
more
does it.
successful.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I think he does it very more successfully for certain films than others.
Mm. To
Uh,
be fair, I haven't watched his entire thing. I've only
oh sure,
watched
sure.
the things that I like that I've consumed so far.
Like Arrival,
Arrival was beautiful. Dune, because I
fantastic.
love Dune. Like the book,
Sure.
the first book, Dune. I think I read it more than 5 times already. But yeah, that's besides the point. We're looking at the cinema people, the directors and producers that you like, not that I like. Who do you
Yeah.
like?
Oh sure. It's hard because like, again I don't like focusing on anything. I really like the. I guess like if I had to do some recency bias, recently like everything I've read is from like the like I think the Daniels was really good. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've always liked yeah, it's very hard because I don't really believe in authorship. Like,
Uh
I
huh.
mean, I understand like, or rather the reference of authorship.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, Kubrick is going to be a thing, but I don't like the idea of like, oh, only they are they
No, this
absolutely must be
I
like,
yeah, I understand what you're getting at. Like this putting authors on a pedestal, like they are the be
yeah,
all, the end all, they cannot make any mistakes. But they
yes,
can. They're human.
yeah, absolutely,
And the
yeah,
other thing is when you put directors and producers on a pedestal or creators on a pedestal, you stop them from being able to break out of their comfort zone
yeah,
because now they
absolutely,
have to
yeah.
keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, and if they want to do that, that's fine. But if they don't, yeah, what you're saying is super valid for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But yeah,
So,
so I guess like, it's all little. I don't like really love one thing. It's
uh-huh.
hard for me to quantify one thing. I guess for a long time, my favorite movie is a very standard like favorite movie for a lot of people. It was The Godfather, the first
It's a good movie.
Godfather. It was a great movie. Yeah, that's really like yeah, it's hard because I don't really like latch onto a single thing for a long
Hmm.
time.
Do you
Yeah.
latch on to themes instead of like movies?
Again, not that either because I just love when a theme is explored well, even if it's
Mm,
in something I don't like. Like I don't really enjoy like sports movies a lot, but like I don't know if you watch Moneyball, and I really
I
liked
don't know what
Moneyball.
that is.
It's a because like, it's a very interesting. It's a movie about like it's a movie about that uses mathematics a lot. It's a baseball movie that uses mathematics a
Oh,
lot
okay,
because it's
okay,
about
okay.
statistics and stuff. It's also like written by Aaron Sorkin, who is like a good dialogist, maybe not a good director. That's a different
Mm,
conversation entirely. But
mm-hmm,
the idea is that like even if it's something, even if it's a setting or genre or a theme that I'm not used to, I will give it a try and see like if the intentionality is set, if
Mhm.
all if like whatever the creatives set out to do, whether they accomplish that. That's all that
Mhm.
matters to me. So like it's hard. I'm not again. I don't really like latch on to one single thing. I like it as
Ah,
long as it's well done,
oh,
and
okay,
and
okay.
that's also a very and that's also very subjective too, right? Like some
Yeah.
people might find different things well done. That's valid, but yeah, it's yeah. I'm sorry for like not a very like
No, it's fine.
that. Yeah, but that's
I
just
think
how I guess my reality.
it is interesting and enlightening to come across people who do a broad spectrum instead of zone in. Like I'm a very zoned in person. I like what I
Oh,
like.
yeah, that's cool. That's
So
great.
I like how refreshing it is to talk to someone who is more like I like a lot of things. I don't know
Yeah,
why, but I
yeah,
do.
yeah.
It's nice to not pigeonhole yourself. I feel again
Yeah.
we're going back
Oh,
to not putting yourself on a pedestal or not putting a person on a pedestal to allow
yeah.
yourself to experience the whole gamut of humanity. I guess
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when you
That's
go, I
essentially
love
what it is.
this. Again, you're putting a barrier against yourself to not like
Yeah,
anything else.
yeah. It's not a bad thing, obviously, but it's not the worst thing I would say because like maybe because like you like what you like, right? And you
Mm.
can't like force people to like things they don't like. That's just like you can't
Oh,
control.
I
You can't
try
control
to
it. Yeah, it's
force
just
myself to
about
like things.
yeah. As long as
It
you're not hurting anyone, it's being you just want to be respectful. And that's fine too. If you want to try to open yourself up to new things, that's cool. Even if it's difficult, that's so cool. That's great too. That's incredibly respectful. Oh my gosh.
let me tell you,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. Like I try. I'll be like every so often I'll go up to my friends who don't share my musical affinities and go, "Give
Oh.
me 5 songs from your favorite artists." And I
Wow.
I will sit down and I will try. And I think the worst one uh that I really really tried to because so many people love her is Taylor Swift. I sat down,
Oh,
tried to
sure,
listen,
sure.
could not.
Uh,
Like I could not
yeah, that's
relate to
fair.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also not a Taylor Swift person, but when I go karaoke with friends, like if they choose the Taylor Swift song, I vibe into
No,
it. It's like, oh, got
I
nothing in my
am
brain. Yeah,
not.
all right.
I do not reject karaoke. You go there
Yeah,
to have fun. You sing everything.
yeah,
And
exactly, exactly.
it's not like she doesn't exist in like the common popular spheres anyway. It's not like I don't
Yes.
know her songs.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So if we're doing karaoke, you better
sure.
believe I'm putting 120% into that shit.
Yeah, respect, my respect. But yeah, I get it. Like sometimes you just don't like a thing, and that's okay.
Mm-mm. But damn, I try. I try.
Good for
I
you, man.
try.
I'm not a big music person. That's
Uh-huh.
just me, but yeah, I'll enjoy when it's here and there.
Okay, okay, okay,
And
okay.
I also appreciate like the very good like storytelling that songs that a lot of music can do. So that's
Mm-hmm.
super cool. It's just there's only so much time. There's only so much time to get into things. You can't get into
It's
everything.
true.
I had to like basically I was into music at the point. I was like, oh, but I'm also watching so much stuff. I'm also playing so much games. I'm also doing all these things. I gotta cut some things out. And in my case, it was just I'm gonna listen to that music. That's just the
Dance
unfortunate
music for life.
thing.
Okay. I would be in the same position, but I am one of those people who just disrespects the visual medium sometimes because I watch everything at 2 times
Oh,
the speed, and
oh, sure,
it's
sure.
horrible.
Do you also
But
watch it on the phone? Martin Scorsese is
no,
gonna
no, no,
scold
no. I
you and
cannot
all that
like
stuff.
my my phone, like the pride I have in my phone is the fact that I can maintain a battery life of 110 hours. Like
Wow.
people be like, "What's your
Oh,
phone life?" And I'm
smartphone,
like,
that's wild.
110 hours. Excuse you? Like, haha,
that's
it will never die.
that's awesome.
Um, I can't watch things on my phone. If it's on my phone, it will be audio only because I don't like looking at
Oh,
tiny screen. I don't like holding a screen to my face.
sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't stop me from consuming web content at 2 times the speed. It is so blasphemous to a lot of people. But I say that I cannot do the same with music. Like I cannot change the speed of
Sure.
music.
Yeah, you
That's
got
the
to
only
listen to
thing.
it at your tempo.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, one can say the same about cinema. Like you shouldn't put 2 times the speed when you
Yeah.
watch like certain movies, right? And I'm like, but it's so slow.
Yeah. it's like enjoy what you want to enjoy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, however you want to enjoy it. It's fine, right? And I have obviously like taste that I'm very strong about,
Mhm.
but ultimately, and I do like, for example, rib my friends about like certain taste they have, and which is like toxic as hell. Don't do that, people.
Let's
But
not do that. We all do it, but let's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
Um,
But it's also like at the end of the day, I have to be like respectful of like
yeah.
whatever they like. And that's that's what it is. What it is. And
Oh,
watching two
I.
live speed, I think that's okay. Like because some people they cannot watch, they just cannot watch it, and maybe they have ADHD, so they cannot
Mhm.
watch like I have a friend who has ADHD, so he cannot watch any like movies that has below dialogue. So like
Ah.
I don't know how you feel about like the recent Mad Max movie, Mad Max Fury. I love it. It's like
I loved
to
it
me at least.
because I am a fan of what's her name? I cannot remember her name right now.
Charlize Theron.
Yeah, Charlize Theron. She is
Yeah,
so underrated. Like she has been in
yeah,
so many movies, and I have
yeah,
loved every one that I have seen her in.
yeah. She's fantastic, yeah, for sure. And I think like that movie is like in general a cinematic masterpiece, and that's just me.
Hmm.
But it has very little dialogue, and
Hmm.
like I have a friend who like has ADHD, and he basically cannot watch any movies that's real dialogue, like things like that. Things like Wally is very difficult for him because like
Hmm.
people have to be talking. If not, I'm not interested. It's just like okay, I
Ah.
guess like it's like that's a valid thing. Like these things are great movies, but it's not to you, and that there's nothing that there's very little that can be done about that. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay,
Some
that's
people
fine.
are visual folks. Like when you're talking about very little
Sure. Yes.
dialogue, it's just a visual feast. Like, have you seen The Fall?
Yeah, the fall with Wolverine, Hugh Jackman.
He
Oh wait, no,
was
no,
he?
not. Oh,
No, no,
sorry,
no,
that's
no,
the
no.
Fountain. The fall with Lee Pace. Sorry.
Yes, Lee Pace.
Yeah.
Such a
Oh
good looking
yeah.
man. Uh, that
Yeah.
that was an absolute visual feast. I remember watching it
Yeah.
and
It
just being
truly
in
was.
awe. And then just
Absolutely.
buckling down to go through like where did they film? And they filmed so many places. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my god, how
It was
much
an
money do you guys
expensive
have?
production.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it is again a visual feast. And when I talk about Denis Villeneuve, again, he is a visual feast. Like when you watch
Yeah.
his
For
movies,
sure.
it's a
Yeah.
visual feast. Or
Yes.
Guillermo del Toro, for example, again, visual feast, a master of monster creation. I love
Yeah.
that shit. I will eat that
Although
shit up.
he's actually pretty decent at dialogue too. He's like his movies are pretty talky, and I think
Mm-hmm.
in a good way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I never really thought about
Yeah.
it. I've always
Yeah. Think
just
about
been
Pan's
entertained.
Labyrinth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
they're
I've
entertaining. Yeah,
always
that's enough.
been entertained by his secret politics.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Like
Like you watch Pan's
people
Labyrinth, you watch Shape of Water. And you're like, okay, yes,
not
that's
even
a
that, like the
you
most
just
innocuous one that just recently came out was Pinocchio. And I remember somebody saying, "Oh
yeah.
yeah, I sat down with my kid to watch Pinocchio thinking it was a kids movie. I didn't expect to be
That's
talking about
that's
Mussolini
Nazis
and
in
fascism." And I was like,
it.
"Oh,
And
oh
like
damn."
yeah, hey, have you watched Indiana Jones? Okay, I wonder what's in those guys. Yeah, it's like people. There's no such thing as like, oh, this is not a political movie. I mean,
No.
even saying that is political in and of
Mm-mm,
itself.
mm-mm.
Like everything
I,
is political. Like
I don't think you can have an apolitical movie. An apolitical movie, I feel, is a
correct.
very boring movie.
Correct. No, it
No,
doesn't.
it's a
No, it's
screensaver.
simply it's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible to exist. Like it's
Hmm.
almost basically impossible to exist. Like
Yeah,
even I'm showing like even if you're showing like a person buying a banana like and like that's like that feeds into like capitalism and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
oh
yeah.
you're buying that even small things like that like there's no like ethical consumption under capitalism. So that's inherently political.
You did a story about the pirate cove, right? The pirate stone.
Yes.
What attracted you to this story? What is the full title of it? What is the TLDR of the story?
I don't have a title for it, and I think I will leave it as this because that's a better thing that a lot of artists do. They don't title their work. This is actually a very normal thing.
Oh.
But I will talk about part of it is because there's no real like narrative behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I will just talk about the historical aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
The basically during like the earlier times of like Singapore, it used to be called Temasek. The
Mm-hmm.
Malayu natives called it Temasek. This rock was called. Wait, I should look at my notes too as I look at this. Uh, This rock was called the Batu Balaya or Sailing Rock. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
according to records going back to, if we're talking about because like Singapore has a lot of relations with China,
Yeah.
According to records going back to the Yuan dynasty, uh, this rock, the Batu Belayar, I will call it by its current known name, Long Yamen. Long Yamen was basically uh, a marker for Singapore so that people coming to Singapore to do trading would
Mm-hmm.
see Long Yamen and be like, okay, that's Singapore. That's specifically this arch rock feature that we go under to enter Singapore and start doing trade.
Uh-huh.
A traveler from China during the Yuan dynasty, named Wang Dayan, remarked that the hills between the two rocks
Mm-hmm.
kind of look like two dragon teeth, and that's how the name Long Yamen, which means like dragon teeth, was named. And later on, I mean, at the same time, a general by the name of Admiral Zheng He, during the time, held a number of voyages to several Asian territories, including Singapore, to like open trade routes and sort of be expansionist in terms of trading, not in terms of like conquest or anything. And had to use and saw Long Yamen as a hub and marker, not just to do trade in Singapore, but as a again like historically Singapore has been a trade post for ships, and they like a sort of a home base for ships to rest as they go to different regions around.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that opportunity too. And so like he used Yulong Yamen as like a marker for that. So on top of all of that that happened, Singapore was also known as a very big pirate cove. So it's very funny because like a lot of traders will come in, but as they're leaving, they will get robbed by pirates, and that's kind of the reputation that Singapore had pre-colonial times.
Uh-huh.
The British, when they took over, they gave it a different name based on the story of Lot's wife from the Bible. But I'm not gonna acknowledge that. That's like serious. And they what they did too was they destroyed the bridge. Basically, there's
Okay.
like no to the point that there's essentially no record of what it originally looked like, at least to my knowledge. It might be out there, but like I don't see it. I can't find any record of what the entire arch originally looked like. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
you'll only see the broken depiction of it, and it's like that's kind of like a sad sort of colonial erasure,
Yeah.
which is like very typical in like any
Mm.
colonized territory. What I do like about the narrative of this history is showing a sort of picture of the complications of the human construct that is like land ownership,
Mm-hmm.
how land is claimed and exploited by different parties, like sort of like changing and stripping it of its natural identity. It's sort of like if you know the ship of Theseus,
Mm-hmm.
where like a ship that has all its parts replaced, is it still the same thing it used to be? And this is sort
Mm-hmm.
of like that in a way. Uh, and it's especially prudent because it's a story I never really heard of until I started doing research on Singapore stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably because of that problem with colonialist like erasure of said history.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess for why I decided to depict my piece that way, just to explain, my piece is a picture of Long Yamen, but as a postcard, and it's showing like a traditional Chinese junk, which is a Chinese ship that's used
Mm-hmm.
for trade, and it's kind of like a tourist poster. It's like, ooh, Dragon's Teeth Gate, Singapore. It's kind of like a very inviting look to it. Like, oh, it's a tourist destination. I do think I want to tie that into like the themes of like of understanding the sincere like history of pirates. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
contemporary media have a very sanitized version of pirates as like they're kind of fun. They're kind of like these like scallywags of free will and like freedom in the world and stuff. But the truth is not about them are not great. They're like there's a lot of terrible things associated with privatization. But it's still an important part of like my country's history. And
Mm-hmm.
like it's playing with both idea of like, oh, this is a terrible like there's a lot of terrible like atrocities that are committed with like the piracy and stuff. But it's
Yeah.
also like it's still important to know that it happened. So I kind of like to have that playful nature of like, oh, this is a very inviting place. Come to enjoy the wonders of Singapore, Temasek. Even though it is actually a very dangerous place, and that's basically the idea. It's just very, very, very simple irony. That's all it
Again,
is.
again, falling back on the whole idea that Singapore is just incredibly, incredibly good at marketing themselves.
Yes, it's that yeah. I think you have that's a great point you bring up. So yeah, it's the idea of like, oh hey, uh, this is the thing about Singapore. Yes, Singapore has a reputation in the world, whether it's deserved or not. you can ask person to person whether they deserve it, but they did a good job in like making themselves like seem like a very prosperous country, and they are. And like if you look at like a very specific set of standards, yes, they are. High GDP, low crime rate, all that stuff. Like a wealthy country.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the paper, it's like, oh, there's a lot of diversity. Cool, and it's true. There's a lot of different people. Like yeah, but it's like it's like kind of you can make arguments about melting pot
Mm-hmm.
and how that kind of like sanitizes or scrubs away also cultural identity because of that. But yeah, but the yes, the like your point stands is that great marketing about that might be hiding some like not great truths.
I mean, that's what marketing is. It's just
Yes,
obligatory
you're right.
PR. I thought
Exactly.
it was very clever that you did that because everybody who did art for this project went in such different ways that when you give us yours, I was like, I would never have thought. Purely because it was so hard to find stories that is authentically Singaporean. And unfortunately for you, we had taken a bulk of it. And then when you came in, you're like, which
Yeah, cause
story?
like what story am I gonna do? I'm gonna do the typical ass Malayan story, which is another Singapore story. It's like, but it's also again another sanitized story of like,
No, no,
oh,
here's
what
the
a
thing.
funny
So,
tale.
Sun wanted to do the Merlion, and then I did a
Yeah.
bit of research, and I found out the Merlion isn't even like a thing. It was a creation of some white guy to market for Singapore.
Oh,
And
that's
I just sat there and just went, what?
uh,
Just absolutely
uh,
gut wrenching.
and
Like,
I
it was
don't
even
know.
real.
That's so funny, and also like thank you for finding that. I will also say there's probably another sort of valid but like kind of lame reason
Uh-huh.
is a lot of it is also like commercial rights. The
Yes.
Merlion is a trademarked
Yes.
property.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
if I had to draw it, it would have been probably there might have been some intellectual complications, which is fair. I'm sure, whatever.
Yeah, I
You
don't
know.
think any of us wants to fight with the Singapore government about rights. Like
Are you sure
they'll
about
be,
that?
I don't want to do it. They'll be like, oh yeah, we own
Yeah.
this. No, you don't. Sad.
Just yeah, that's just a nightmare to do. But also, the thing what you had mentioned about like uh basing a whitewash history of Singapore.
Hmm.
Ah, what a terrible thing to try to honor, you know?
Mm. It also is because again, I'm talking about the whole of Southeast Asia. At some point, we were very, very, very incredibly interconnected. Now we have 11 countries, but before it used to be like
Yeah,
three.
yeah, it
And
sure is.
for yeah, and for Singapore especially, we were the same nation up to a certain
Sure.
point. So a lot of the
Yes.
stories were actually Malaysian, like the peninsula stories
Yeah, yeah.
that shared
Again,
a border,
yeah. Drawing
which
lines on maps.
yeah,
Who would have thought that, like what does that do, really?
it's so complicating in trying to find a story. What was your experience trying to find, for example, the Dragon's Tooth Gate story? Like
Oh
what did you have to
yeah.
go through?
I went to the actual site, and that's like essentially they have a placard there that kind
Mm-hmm.
of tells this like very safe story about like just not say safe, but very like they try to be they try to be objective. I don't want to use that word lightly because because people use that word wrong all the time. Very
Uh-huh.
few things in the human experience is objective.
Mm-hmm.
Very few. Like but like yeah, it tries to do a very like objective like information. It's just an information of like this thing happened, that thing happened. Yeah. That's fine. That's right. And then you want it to be that, but it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like there's no lens to like sort of interpret,
Mm-hmm.
and also there's very little information outside of that. Like I mostly try to do a lot of online research
Mm-hmm.
and like and there's a lot of the physical sourcing of like the books essentially don't exist, or at least
Huh?
they're hard to track down rather.
Uh-huh.
Because like, there's not much to be said because it just what it is that the British
Yeah.
owners of the
Yeah,
country
they
just didn't
want to
really care much.
ignore they want to ignore the history of whoever they
Yeah,
colonize essentially
yeah.
because like
Not I wouldn't say
before they were
oh,
barbarians.
I I wouldn't know if there was a willful like erasure in this case, or rather they just didn't care. You know, like
Ah, fair, fair,
who
fair.
gives a damn about this thing? This thing is blocking our ships from coming in. Let's destroy it. And that's made
Ah,
probably the extent of like their use of it. You know,
that
because like
makes
it was a Dutch,
sense
yeah, it
because
was destroyed.
the junks were much smaller ships than their like
Correct,
navy boats.
correct. Yeah, that was. But they at least they were honest about. Yeah, they destroyed it because their ships were not big enough to come in because of the gate. Like okay,
Mm.
and that's all you thought about it, and that's why you don't have much like written context about it. Cool, lost history. What else is new?
Ah, sad. And
Yeah,
because they don't have the original stone, they erected like a fake one,
a
like
replica.
a
Yes.
replica version. How does
Yeah.
that make you feel? Like to be like, hey, we have a pretend version, like this is Disneyland for a rock.
I mean, I don't know how I feel about it.
I think we had a really good conversation. I'm very, very
Yeah,
happy to have
thank
sat
you.
down with you.
Yes, you've been an excellent host. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much. I try. I hope you have said anything and everything that you wanted to say in regards to your piece of art. If I haven't
Yeah, I
touched
think
on
so.
anything, no.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
We did have there was a quite a lengthy thing, and I think that it was pretty well. I think at
I
least
think it's good.
all of it like sort of encompasses it to why it came out to be how it is.
Yes. Also, I'm always interested in who the artist is, who you are as a person.
Mm,
It's not really how much you know, it's how you got here based on your
yeah.
lived experiences. And I
Yeah.
am happy to sort of be a part of that knowledge now, that canon. I exist in Angrooh
I
canon now.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that. Ingratiating yourself
Yeah.
into the fabric. I get it.
Thank you everybody for watching. We will see you next time. Please go to the Kickstarter page, buy all the things. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sitting down with me and talking with me and enlightening me on so many things. I've learned many, many things, and I have
Oh,
many
pleasure.
homework to
Me
do.
too. Mm.
And I will see you next time. And I hope that we keep in touch. Definitely.
Thank you. You too. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you
Okay.
for having me.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye. Bye.